So, some of you might know that I recently started watching Berserk, specifically Berserk Redux. And about 30 minutes into chapter 5, I actually paused it and thought I needed to read the manga. So please be patient with me if I don't get some things right, and also please don't spoil anything for me. But I need to vent about this because it's insane. Casca's story really did a number on me. She wasn't just some side character, she was a leader, number 3 in the Band of the Hawk, a fighter who earned her place among men who didn't hand out respect easily. And then the Eclipse comes along, and she's gone. What's left is a broken, childlike version of herself, her mind protecting her from reliving that day. Hey everyone, I'm Nikanak, and I make videos about everything I question and overthink, and today we're talking about Casca's agonizing, gut-wrenching fall. So without further ado, let's get into it. After the eclipse, Casca was just a shell of her former self. She had once been strong, independent, and passionate, but now she couldn't even recognize the people she fought beside. She was like an infant in an adult's body, and for me, it's one of the saddest character transformations I've ever seen. Now, Casca didn't regress because she was weak. She regressed because her mind couldn't process what happened to her. That's what trauma does. It overwhelms you to the point where the brain has to protect itself. Sometimes that means blocking out all the memories tied to the event. Sometimes it means undoing parts of your mental development, forcing you back into a childlike state where you don't have to hold responsibility or face unbearable memories. Now, to really understand why this happened, we need to go back to the events leading to this. Now, before we get into Casca's emotional state during the eclipse, I feel like I really need to say this. If anyone tries to argue that Casca enjoyed what happened to her during the eclipse, my only advice will be for you to please look at the source material. In the manga, she says no. No means no. The way Kentaro Miura drew the scene doesn't change that. Trauma doesn't erase how the body might respond, and response does not equal consent. Griffith raped Casca. That's the truth. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about what actually happened. Leading up to the events before the eclipse, I, just like everyone else, knew something was about to go down. Something. But never in my wildest dreams have I ever seen this as the outcome of what's to come. And the eclipse is truly one of the most brutal things I've seen in fiction. Casca watches her comrades, her family, her brothers, slaughtered and devoured by apostles. The Band of the Hawk is massacred in front of her eyes. She sees Pippin and Judeo die trying to protect her, and she's overwhelmed and tormented by remorse. Then she's surrounded and, I want to say, assaulted by apostles. That terror alone would have been enough to shatter her. But what comes next is worse. The man she devoted her entire life, or at least up to this point, sacrifices everything, transforms into femto, and betrays them all as if they never really had any value to him. And the first thing he does in his new form is rape Casca, directly in front of a helpless Guts. It's almost impossible to imagine what was happening in her head. Just a chapter earlier, and by chapter earlier I mean the Redux version, Casca had nearly ended her own life from exhaustion and despair. Seeing Griffith broken after they rescued him nearly destroyed her. And then, in this moment, she's forced to watch the band that she led die around her, stripped of her ability to protect or command, assaulted by monsters, and finally violated by Griffith. Now, I believe Griffith's choice wasn't random. Killing Casca wouldn't have been enough. He needed something worse, something that would scar her and scar Guts, And that's what makes this so cruel. On top of that, when Casca first met Griffith, he saved her from almost the exact same fate. But I'll get to that a little bit later. And during the eclipse, he ripped that away. By assaulting her, Griffith took back the very agency he had once, I don't want to say given her, but in a way he did give her that agency. And he took it away in the most horrific way possible. Her survival wasn't mercy, it was just cruelty. He left her alive because being broken would cut deeper than death. The God Hand themselves even say it.
Life and death, all here to enjoy before our very eyes.
And I think that's what makes this so devastating. Casca wasn't enjoying anything. She was fractured, her mind overwhelmed by conflicting emotions, devotion and betrayal, love and hate, pain and shock, all colliding at once. It definitely wasn't pleasure. It was her psyche putting up a shield and breaking apart so she wouldn't have to face the reality of what was happening. And also, I think it's important to mention here that Casca, for all her strength, absolutely all her strength, was never the brute force of the Hawks like Guts. She was the strategist and a leader. But here, there was nothing to plan. No one left to lead. She was completely defenseless. And this goes to all the people that I've seen saying, oh, well, why did Casca not put up a fight? She was completely defenseless, stripped of everything that made her who she was. And this was just soul-crushing. Seeing Casca, this proud, capable, fearless leader, turned into someone who could no longer speak for herself, no longer fight, no longer even exist as the person she once was. The contrast between who she was before the eclipse and what she became after is just devastating. What makes her story even more tragic is that it all started with a single moment, the day Griffith handed her a sword. The world of Berserk may be fictional, but it takes a lot from medieval society. And while I wouldn't say Casca's entire character so far is defined by being a woman, a lot. And I mean, a lot of her struggles come directly from that fact. According to the British Literature Wiki, women were viewed as second-class citizens, and their needs always were an afterthought. They were either held to be completely deceitful, sexual, innocent, or incompetent. Therefore, women were mostly withheld from positions of power or speaking their voice. Males made decisions for them, and their lives were dictated by the man that ran the society. And that's exactly the kind of world that Casca is living in. Even as a kid, she couldn't escape it. Her parents sold her off to a nobleman, and the first thing he tried to do was take what was in his. And that moment alone could have defined her entire life. But instead, Griffith appeared. He didn't swoop in to comfort her or tell her everything would be all right. He tossed her a sword and told her,
"If you have something to protect, then take up the sword."
Terrified, she held it out, and when the nobleman fell on the sword, it was that moment that changed the course of her life. Griffith gave her nothing more than a sword and a blanket, but to Casca, it was everything. For the first time, she did have power. For the first time, she could fight back. And from that day on, she dedicated herself to him completely. Now, Casca wasn't just another soldier in the Band of the Hawk. She became Griffith's right hand, a commander respected for her strength and leadership on the battlefield. Her devotion to Griffith fueled that rise because she wanted to be his sword, the one who helped him achieve his impossible dream. But her path was never simple. From the very beginning, she had to prove herself twice as hard because she is a woman. For instance, Quercus threw snide remarks about her relationship with Guts and her womanhood in her face. When she collapsed during the 100-man battle because of her period, Guts told her that this is why women weren't meant to be warriors. And when Griffith ordered her to lie naked with Guts to keep him warm, he justified it by saying it was a woman's duty. No matter how skilled she became, moments like these reminded Casca that the world still reduced her to something she was fighting so hard to rise above. But Casca wasn't only defined by those struggles. She had her victories too. She became the third strongest in the Band of the Hawk. Not by chance, but by sheer determination. She led soldiers into battle, earned the respect of her comrades, and proved herself as both a warrior and a leader. For a full year after Griffith's capture, Casca was the one holding the Band of the Hawk together. She led them as fugitives, kept them alive, and earned the respect of men who at first didn't believe a woman could command them. That in and of itself is incredible because she managed to lead an army of mercenaries, many with big egos probably, through one of the most desperate times in their history. But it came at a cost. The weight of responsibility left her exhausted, worn down, and often hopeless. So when Guts finally returned from his hiatus, she snapped. The moment he stepped back into camp, the same soldiers she had led for a year immediately turned to him, calling him captain, acting like he'd never left. Now, they didn't ignore Casca, but it was clear they instinctively placed Guts above her. And for Casca, that must have hurt. After everything she endured to keep them together, after all the sacrifices she made, it must have felt like she could never truly win the respect she deserved. And that pressure broke her. In her anger and despair, she lashed out at Guts. But beneath that fury was just exhaustion and the crushing realization that no matter what she did, she'd never be enough. In that moment, Casca nearly ended her own life. And that's also important to mention because this wasn't just some impulsive, heat of the moment reaction. It was the culmination of a year spent carrying everyone else's burden, of constantly fighting to prove herself, only to feel invisible the second Guts came back. But Guts stopped her. He didn't just save her physically, he comforted her and reminded her she wasn't alone. And that moment changed everything between them. They finally let their guard down, admitted how they felt, and spent the afternoon leading into evening together. For the first time, Casca chose something for herself, not for Griffith or his dream, but for her. But even then though, her sense of duty never disappeared. After her near breaking point, she was the one who led the rescue effort for Griffith. She planned it, organized it, and put in the effort to bring him back. And when they did, when they saw the broken shell he had become, she still chose to stay by his side. She told Guts she couldn't abandon him, and that choice makes what happens in the Eclipse even more devastating. After everything Casca endured for Griffith, after saving him and staying loyal even when he was at his lowest, he would ultimately betray her along with everyone else she fought so hard to protect. At the end, she just blocked out everything tied to Griffith, which means everything and everyone she had met while being with the Band of the Hawk, which means losing nearly all her memories going back to when he first saved her. And Casca, she doesn't just have PTSD. In the beginning of chapter 5, it's shown that her mind had snapped. She doesn't remember people. She's in a regressed mental state, mute and terrified. It's her psyche's way of shielding her from the Eclipse. And now I know some people might argue that this was a disservice to her character and what comes next, and maybe in some ways they're right. But here's how I see it. Casca wasn't as physically strong as Guts, but she carried an army on her back for a year and prior to that. And then in one night, she lost all of it. She watched her family die, was assaulted by monsters, and then raped by Griffith, the man she had devoted her life to, in front of the man she loved. That's not something any human being could process. And honestly, there's even a part of me that is not surprised that this is where she ended up. Even Kentaro Miura admitted that sparing Casca was partly for narrative reasons. In an interview from the Berserk official guidebook, he said, "The point I had to pay attention to was making sure the flow of the story wasn't completely severed with the Eclipse." That's why I spared Casca. If she had died and the series continued for a long time, I feared the reason for revenge would become something of the past. And if Guts were to establish new relationships, then his incentive would waver. It may seem calculating and unpleasant, but it's because Casca's by his side that he can never forget the eclipse. And honestly, this stung a little bit to hear her described as a narrative device for Guts. But at the same time, I don't think he ever wrote her as just that. Post-eclipse Casca is just heartbreaking by design. She's there to remind us of everything that was lost, and of just how high the cost of Griffith's betrayal really was. And that's why, once again, it hurts so much. Because when you look at her before and after, the difference is unbearable. Casca, once again, wasn't just another soldier. She was one of the pieces of the heart of the Band of the Hawk. And now she's left with nothing. Not her memories, not her agency, not even her voice. Now, I don't know what happens next in the manga or the Redux, but I am definitely excited to see where the story goes, and I just hope it doesn't get any worse. But that might be a very, very naive thought on my part, and please, 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 once again, I beg of you, no spoilers. If I didn't mention anything and it seems like I don't know some things, then your thinking is probably right. But from everything I've seen so far, Casca's story to me is unforgettable. And of course, what do you think? How do you interpret Casca's regression after the eclipse? And what does her story mean to you? And also, would you like to see me do more Berserk content? Because I'm very invested in this world right now. Let me know all of that in the comments down below. And if you're still here, thanks for watching. And now remember, the important thing is to always, always keep questioning, even me. Till next time.